celebration of the King. That ceremony will take place in just a couple of moments. Introductions getting underway. It is happening at the Sir John A. Macdonald building. That is right across from Parliament Hill. Expected to be about an hour long. There will be music. There will be representation from Indigenous groups, and you will start to see some of the ways that Canadian life will change concretely with coins and stamps with the new face of the King on those parts of Canadian life. And so we'll see different people featured at this event and talk you through it. And then after, we'll have some special guests to talk about what this means for this country, that King Charles is now in place and taking on a different role for this country and for the Commonwealth. Let's go now live to the ceremony there, here in the nation's capital, and we'll pop up when we need to explain different things to you. We'll listen in live.
The importance of service to others and celebrating the diversity of our country.
On this special occasion, we not only mark the beginning of the reign of His Majesty King Charles III, King of Canada, but we also acknowledge the special relationship our sovereign has had with our country for over 50 years. Looking to the future, today's ceremony brings together artists and speakers who reflect the values that Canada and His Majesty share, such as reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, protecting the environment, service to others, and celebrating our country's diversity. I would now like to introduce Albert Dumont, Algonquin's spiritual advisor, poet and storyteller, who is known for his social activism and defense of the rights of Indigenous peoples. His statement will be followed by the Eagle River Singers, who will perform an honor song. Albert Dumont.
From the eastern sky, a new dawn enters Indigenous sacred land. The memories of the oldest pines rise to greet its shimmering light. The trees sway joyfully in remembrance of a happy time long ago, before the power of the British sword destroyed the tranquility of gentle Turtle Island. Today, a vow made from afar brings hope that honor will again grace the circle from which the wampum of peace and friendship is held tightly in the care of Minu Manitou, the Good Spirit. A new day showing itself on the horizon, bringing forth the heart of an honorable human being who steps forward. His crown he lays before God. The measure of his word he lays before the people. The blood of our hearts send forth a hopeful song in recognition of Charles III, the King of the Commonwealth, who promises to strengthen the human bond between the monarchy and all peoples of the Commonwealth. The voices of our fathers and grandfathers rise. The voices of our mothers and grandmothers rise. We speak, they say, for the dying waters and the poisoned winds of our homelands. Restore the relationship with them as well as with the people. King Charles III of the Commonwealth, hear our drum. Respect it as you would your song of life. We sing to honor the commitment you make for a better world for all. We stand together, side by side, and show our souls to Creator. Let the power of the honor song cleanse away the wrongs of the past. The road we walk now together in peace and friendship lives in the song of honor.
Merci à Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Dumont and the Eagle River Singers for that moving moment. It is now my pleasure to invite Farah Alibey, aerospace engineer and champion of volunteerism, to give an address. Farah Alibey. Good morning. I wanted to start my speech by thanking you, fellow Canadians, for having invited me to speak today. Being a woman, a daughter of immigrants of Indian descent, and a queer person, these privileged spaces have not always been open to people like me. The world is evolving, becoming more inclusive, and we are continuing to learn from the more difficult parts of our history. It is therefore with optimism and humility that I have come to share this moment with you.
One of the major themes evoked on the occasion of this coronation is that of community and volunteering, values that are dear to my heart and that of my family. Sometimes these concepts can seem to be bigger than ourselves and to require significant investments in time and money. Yet, what I can say from experience is that small acts of kindness and empathy can change a person's trajectory and literally help them reach the stars.
When my mother's family immigrated to Canada in the 70s, fleeing Madagascar, the country of their birth, due to civil unrest, they felt completely out of place. People spoke in a strange accent, crystallized frozen water fell from the sky, and sub-zero weather seemed to be the norm for months on end. As they learned to adapt to this new reality, in a city where immigrants of color were still very rare, it was the individuals around them who welcomed them with open arms and helped them integrate into the country that they now called home. Whether it was the teachers who took the time to help my mother and her siblings close the gap in their academics, the community who came to my grandfather's restaurant, or Mr. and Mrs. LeBlanc, my family's neighbors, who helped them learn how to shovel their driveway and change out their summer tires in preparation for their first winter in Quebec. It is these people, this community, that are the reason my family has been able to prosper and thrive in Canada.
Growing up, our home life wasn't full of luxuries. Despite this, my parents instilled in my brother and I the core values of duty and service. They always told us, take what you need, live comfortably, of course, but that which you have in excess, be generous with. It is in fact those who have the least who often give the most. Generosity can have various forms, whether it be in the shape of material goods, time, expertise, mentorship, the possibilities are endless. My parents encouraged my brother and I to acknowledge the privileges that we had and to be involved in our community by helping others in the best way we could. They led by example, and they still do, be it by helping new immigrant families to integrate. I can't tell you how many pictures I get from my mom of her new grandchildren freshly welcomed into our inner circle. By running errands for elderly relatives, or simply by dropping off a meal to a friend going through a tough time. Service was never a chore to us, but rather part of our DNA. It simply just was our way of giving back in thanks for all the help that had been received in our lives and those of our ancestors. Along the way, I experienced firsthand the power that individuals can have in the lives of others. I've had exceptional educators who went far above and beyond their duties to make sure that I would not only succeed and flourish, but that I would be encouraged to follow the career of my dreams in aerospace engineering, despite all the other obstacles that were in the way. There were friends and their families that made me feel welcomed and loved when I was suffering from bullying and racism. There have also been countless mentors and colleagues who have helped me prepare for interviews and presentations, who encouraged me to apply for positions I didn't think I deserved, or who listened when I was struggling as one of the very few women in my field. All these people, each individual, through their acts of kindness, led me to where I am today.
Now that I've charted my own path, I consciously Every day, choose to take time to give back to the community that surrounds me by sharing the gifts that were nurtured in me by others. I recognize that the future is built by all of us, working together, supporting each other, and sharing. This concept of service and community isn't unique to my family. It is one that is shared across Canada and the Commonwealth. It is a value that defines us as a people. So today, I invite you to take a moment to acknowledge the community that had a hand in raising you and in the journey you've taken to be here. I encourage you to be empathetic to those around you and to take a small break from your busy lives to lend a hand to a person you might not normally have taken the time to help. The impact that you might have is no doubt greater than you can imagine. Who knows? Maybe someday you'll receive the greatest gift of all in return, a message or a note that starts with, "Because of the time you took to help me, I too was able to achieve my dream. Thank you."
Thank you, Farah, for those inspiring words. I would like to now invite singer-songwriter Florence K. to interpret her song Vol de Nuit, which celebrates new beginnings and expresses a heartfelt hope for a brighter future.
Lorsque la nuit s'apprête à décider ce qu'elle fera de nous, un vol de nuit, un instant, une journée, un horizon qui s'ouvre à nos pieds. Lorsqu'on a pensé à tout ce qu'il fallait pour faire de ce monde un rêve éveillé, mais je crois qu'il n'en tient qu'à nous de regarder devant, de nous tenir debout, pour qu'enfin les enfants de demain soient libres de choisir leur propre chemin. Oh mon amour, la flamme qui brillera viendra du nord, tel un vol de nuit. Oh mon amour, l'étoile qui scintillera viendra du nord, tel un vol de nuit. Lorsque le jour s'apprête à nous montrer ce que la nuit a fait de nous, un vol de nuit, un instant, une journée, un océan de possibilités. Lorsqu'on a tracé tout ce qu'il fallait pour faire de ce rêve un monde éveillé, et je crois qu'il n'en tient qu'à nous de poser un regard sur ce qu'il faut changer pour qu'enfin les vents, les alizés soufflent dans les voiles de notre liberté. qui brillera viendra du nord, tel un vol de nuit. Oh mon amour, l'étoile qui scintillera viendra du nord, tel un vol de nuit. Oh mon amour, la flamme qui brillera viendra du nord, tel un vol de nuit. Oh mon amour, l'étoile qui scintillera viendra du nord, tel un vol de nuit, tel un vol de nuit, tel un vol de nuit.
Merci Florence pour cette
Thank you, Florence, for that wonderful performance. It is now my pleasure to welcome writer, performer, and poet Sabrina Benaim, who will recite a poem she wrote to mark this occasion, entitled To a Dreamer in a Modern World. This work is an ode to the environment.
My hand points to a cloud, and you see a harvest of rainwater. Rivers fed into lakes, feeding to the animals like us, eating what comes from the soil washed clean. A backyard garden abundant, corn, garlic, and tomato, sweet potato, asparagus. You see a pot run wild with parsley, another wild with mint, a bed of primrose, a healthy buzz of bees, tree trunk, to bird's nest in branch, to blossom, to fruit, fallen or plucked, compost or collected and sold for a fair price at the market where you will buy it and bring it home for dessert, served on your hand-carved, locally made wooden table, your glass of wine poured half full. This does not mean you don't see the sky, the plumes of pollution. You are doing what you can. You buy LED light bulbs. You drive a hybrid car. Donate clothes. Don't let the tap run while brushing your teeth. You don't turn on unnecessary lights. You bike in the spring and summer, walk when you can, when the forecast doesn't call for rain. You understand we are also solar powered. There is an intricate chain holding everything here together. Sun to earth and moon to sea. Sun to cloud and cloud to rain to plant, and plant to animal to animal to animal, to human to plant, to human to animal, to human to human. We are all equal part of this planet. You are ocean. Ocean is preserved rainforest, is untapped oil reserve, is coal mine. You are mountain. You are seabed. And the green grass is the cow. And the cow is healthy, grazing in peace under a setting sun. You are a rising sun. You are a dreamer in a modern world. I showed you a cloud and you saw the future. Growth, a coronation of possibility. You reach up and you bring down my hand, hold it in yours, and begin to walk with me, beside me. You say, come on, together, let's leave this place better than we found it.
Merci beaucoup, Sabrina.
Thank you, Sabrina.
I would now like to invite the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, the Honourable Helena Jacek, and Mary LeMay, President and CEO of the Royal Canadian Mint, to come to the stage for the first of several special unveilings marking the coronation of the new monarch and the change of reign.
The Royal Canadian Mint has long played a central role in celebrating Canada's royal traditions. From when Canada's very first commemorative silver dollar was issued in 1935 to celebrate the Silver Jubilee of King George V, to royal weddings, to the late Queen Elizabeth II's jubilees, Canada's royal family has been the subject of some of the Mint's most popular and historic collector coins. Today, the Mint is launching the His Majesty King Charles III Coronation Suite, which consists of 2 fine silver and 2 pure gold coins. Every coin in this collection features an engraving of His Majesty's royal cipher. I would now invite Minister Jacek and Ms. Lemay to unveil one of the silver coins.
Additionally, the government has announced today that the Royal Canadian Mint will design and place an effigy of His Majesty King Charles III on Canadian circulation coins. An effigy of the reigning monarch has appeared on Canadian coins since the Mint first started production of coins in 1908. Thank you, Ms. Lemay. I would now like to invite Minister Jacek to come to the podium and Joanne Polak, Senior Vice President, Corporate and Employee Communications at Canada Post, to come to the stage for another special unveiling.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel and Don. And I'd also like to thank all of the artists for their wonderful performances. Bonjour à tous, distinguished guests. On behalf of the Government of Canada and as the Minister responsible for Canada Post, it's a pleasure to be here today and to unveil the first Canadian stamp featuring His Majesty King Charles III. The coronation of a new monarch is a momentous occasion for Canadians and people throughout the Commonwealth, and it's only fitting that it be celebrated on a Canadian stamp, continuing a long-standing tradition. For more than 170 years, Canada Post has been issuing stamps depicting the Canadian sovereign. Cette tradition qui remonte à
It's a tradition that dates back to 1851, when a pre-Confederation stamp was issued featuring Queen Victoria. This stamp features a portrait of His Majesty, who at the time was the Prince of Wales. The photo was taken by photographer Alan Shawcross, and the stamp was designed by Montreal-based design firm Paprika.
Stamp were chosen following an extensive review and selection process involving an independent stamp advisory committee. The committee guided the designers on the selection of images and creation of the stamp and the official first day cover collectible envelope. The new stamp is a wonderful way to commemorate the historic moment in Canadian history. Before we unveil the stamp, I want to share a quote from His Majesty during the 1996 Royal Tour, one of the many trips he's made to Canada over the last 50-plus years. It's a quote that is included on the back of the stamp booklet and official first day cover. Every time I come to Canada, a little more of Canada seeps into my bloodstream, and from there, straight to the heart. And with that, let's now unveil the stamp.
I now invite my colleague, the Honourable Bill Blair, President of the King's Privy Council for Canada and Minister of Emergency Preparedness, and Sami Khalid, Chief Herald of Canada,
pour les dévoilements.
to come on stage for the next unveilings.
Oui, Bill Blair.
Yes, Bill Blair.
Bon matin, tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. Today is a momentous day for Canada as we celebrate the coronation of His Majesty King Charles III. And before I begin, I'd like to thank Albert Dumont and the Eagle Singers for being with us here today and for welcoming us so warmly on the traditional territory. The Crown of Canada is part of our national identity. It is a fundamental element of our system of government, and it contributes to a sense of unity and pride among all Canadians. It is also in constant evolution, and today marks the beginning of a new chapter in Canadian history. King Charles has a long and fruitful relationship with our country. Some Canadians will remember the first time that he came to Canada as a young man in 1970 to mark the centennial of the creation of the Northwest Territories and Manitoba's entry into Confederation. And since then, King Charles has been to Canada 18 times. He has visited every province and every territory. And on his most recent tour with the Queen Consort in 2022, King Charles met with entrepreneurs in Newfoundland and Labrador. He visited Deta, a Dene Nation, First Nation in the Northwest Territories, to discuss the impact of climate change in our northern communities. And he spoke to students, parents, and teachers about the importance of literacy at an elementary school in Vanier, right here in Ottawa. The King shares many of the values that we hold dear as Canadians. He believes in the importance of giving back to our communities, empowering youth to reach their full potential, protecting the environment, championing the arts, and supporting members of the Canadian Armed Forces, as well as celebrating our diversity. Today is a chance for Canadians from coast to coast to coast to come together in their communities to celebrate these shared values. And as the King himself has said, it is a day to look to the future, to see how we can keep working together to build a better Canada, a better Commonwealth, and a better world. Our royal symbols must be inclusive, to unite us as Canadians, and they must also be unique, to distinguish us in the world. One of the strengths of our constitutional monarchy is its ability to adapt. We have come a long way since 1867, and our symbols have changed to reflect this development. For example, in 1921, King George V gave us our coat of arms, and in 1965, Queen Elizabeth II proclaimed our national flag. King Charles has continued this long tradition, and he has approved new Canadian symbols. The Sovereign's flag, designed by the Canadian Heraldic Authority, is a banner of the Royal Arms of Canada. It is a rectangular representation of the coat of arms of Canada, featuring maple leafs and royal emblems of the United Kingdom and France. The flag emphasizes the Royal Arms of Canada, and they are also the arms of the Monarch of Canada, and will serve all future sovereigns. This distinguishing flag will be used to indicate the King's presence in Canada. It is now my great pleasure to invite Dr. Sami Khalid, the Chief Herald of Canada, as well as Donald Booth, Canada's Secretary to the King, to unveil the King's new flag. Gentlemen. The King has also approved a new Canadian crown, which is designed by the Canadian Heraldic Authority and that represents the symbols of our past, our present, and our future. The new design incorporates uniquely Canadian elements, including stylized maple leaves and a wavy blue line representing our lands and our waterways. It also includes a nod to Indigenous teachings about the importance of and connection to water and the land. And most importantly, for the first time in our history, it is uniquely Canadian. I would now invite Dr. Khalid and Mr. Booth to unveil the Canadian Royal Crown. By renewing emblems like the flag and the Royal Crown, we are marking the next step in His Majesty's long and committed relationship with Canada. We are affirming our Canadian identity and sovereignty in the framework of this time-honored tradition. These new emblems are stable and perpetual symbols of the Canadian monarchy in Canada. From today, they will represent Canada into the future. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Khalid and Mr. Booth, and it's my great honor to invite my colleague, Dominic LeBlanc, Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, to the stage.
Excellences, Messieurs les Présidents
Your Excellencies, Speakers of the Senate and House of Commons,
my colleagues in the House of Commons, distingués invités, distinguished guests. C'est un plaisir d'être parmi vous ce matin.
it is my pleasure to be with you today on this day of the coronation of our sovereign, His Majesty, King Charles III. I would like to thank my colleagues, Minister Blair and Dr. Khalid, for these unveilings which mark the change of reign and the coronation of our new monarch.
Canada has a long and rich relationship with the Crown. From our beginnings as a French colony to today, the monarchy has been an integral part of our institutions and our identity. The coronation of a sovereign is a high watermark in that relationship. It's an occasion we had not witnessed since 1953, when our country was still emerging from the Second World War and when we were coming to terms as a country into our own as a country in terms of a nation of equals. It would be more than 30 years before Canada achieved full independence from the United Kingdom with the repatriation of Canada's Constitution. Millions of Canadians are witnessing the coronation of Canada's sovereign for the first time in a country that is radically different from the one that witnessed the last coronation. But as Canada evolves, so do its institutions, and so does the monarchy. Today, we will witness an event steeped in the traditions dating back to the Middle Ages. But tradition is not an impediment to modernity. By looking to the past, we can better understand our present and witness how we have progressed as a nation. It enables us to look to the future with optimism. Tradition grounds us, offers us a sense of belonging. That is what the Crown embodies: stability and reassurance. La Couronne a également
The Crown also has a long tradition of service in our armed forces, in our communities, and among the most vulnerable. Many governors general have made service to others a defining feature of their mandates. His Majesty himself, when he was still Prince of Wales, led the Prince's Trust, a charitable organization which works with disadvantaged youth and promotes entrepreneurship among veterans. Through honors such as the Order of Canada, the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers, and the Jubilee Medals, the Crown highlights the contributions of Canadians who have displayed extraordinary service to their country. Such commemorative medals have often been created to mark days of national and royal celebration, a tradition which goes all the way back to Confederation. As such, in honor of the coronation of His Majesty King Charles III, the Government of Canada will award 30,000 coronation medals to Canadians who have made important contributions to Canada, a province, a territory, a region, or a community, or who have honored Canada through acts performed abroad.
Nonpartisan nature of Canada's honors make them a model for the world. Many of the world's most successful democracies are constitutional monarchies, and Canada is a prime example of that. From a relatively obscure dominion of a few million people to one of the world's largest economies in just over 150 years, Canada's path has indeed been remarkable. If we are here today, it is because of our institutions, including the Crown, institutions that are stronger. As Canadians and people around the Commonwealth gather to celebrate the coronation of King Charles III, let us be inspired by the values of service embodied by the Crown. Et il me fait maintenant énormément plaisir.
It is now my pleasure to invite my colleague Goody Hutchings, Minister of Rural Economic Development, to the podium to introduce the next musical performance. Thank you.
Merci, Minister LeBlanc.
Thank you, Minister LeBlanc. Greetings.
What a pleasure it is to be here today. And last year in St. John's, I was so honored to welcome His Majesty and the Queen Consort as they began their royal tour in honor of Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee. It was an exciting day for Canadians and especially for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador as we celebrated and showcased the many facets of our province's colorful, vibrant, and deep-rooted cultures and traditions. So once again, offering a glimpse into this lifestyle, it's my pleasure to introduce In Echo, a diverse and energetic traditional music group based out of another island, Prince Edward Island, to perform In the Nick of Time. Enjoy.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Et merci
Thank you, Minister. And thank you, In Echo, for that dynamic performance. To highlight the King's connection to the Canadian Armed Forces, the Central Band of the Canadian Armed Forces Serenade of Strings will perform the Royal Anthem.
Performed by the Central Band of the Canadian Armed Forces Serenade of Strings will be followed by the singing of our national anthem. It will be performed by the Ottawa Regional Youth Choir, an artistic organization that creates a supportive environment for dedicated and musically curious youth.
De 21 coups de canon tirés depuis la colline du Parlement.
The ceremony will conclude with a 21-gun salute fired from Barton by the 30th Field Artillery Regiment of the Royal Canadian Artillery. We thank you once again for your attendance today. Please rise.
Please be seated. We now invite you to join us for a reception in the company of muralist and illustrator Dominic McCourt. We'll carry out a live artwork performance. I also invite you to meet with the organizations who participated in today's unveiling.
Okay, and this is the official end of the ceremony here in the nation's capital with the 21-gun salute happening just near Parliament Hill. You saw at the ceremony really an unveiling of how some of the very practical ways Canadians' lives will change with King Charles now in place. A new stamp, new coins will be in circulation, commemorative coins as well, and some new flags and other tributes to the king that you saw there today, and we'll talk more about them through the next little bit. But you also heard there, primarily, I think, from the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Dominic LeBlanc, what that ceremony was trying to do today, which was to balance tradition and modernity, and give a nod to some of the more complicated factors that have led to the creation of Canada, colonialism being one of them, and that was featured as well. Let's bring in Janice McGregor. She's over there at the John A. Macdonald building and has been following along with the ceremony. Janice, I know, I'll get your take on the ceremony first, and then I do want to talk to you about the new commemorative things that were featured today. But give me your thoughts on the ceremony. I mean, it was quite subdued and really not a multi-hour ceremony. It was a moment to pay tribute to the King and really show how he will be featured in Canadian society moving forward.
Yeah, Rosie, I've been reflecting on 8 months ago, actually, when I was where you are now for the Accession Council, where cabinet meeting as members of the King's Privy Council met to proclaim Charles as king following the passage of his mother, Queen Elizabeth. That day, far more low-key than some of the events that we had seen in London, but surely significant for this country, having a new head of state. Now, 8 months later, this ceremony here really brings to a close this transition, if you will, and officially begins the new monarchy of King Charles III. In the room, I can tell you, a very different atmosphere too to the one that we saw at Westminster Abbey in London. Even to the point where when that traditional music group from Prince Edward Island in Echo was playing, toes started tapping, people were clapping. There was a warmth and an informality to the feel of that room, that I thought was kind of more our style, if you will, as Canadians. But there was also a common theme. I think, this morning in London, we heard a service that was very much about a king, in the words of the service, that wasn't there to be served, but to serve. And the idea of public service very much at the forefront of some of the words spoken in that room as well.
Yeah, I think those are all excellent points, Janice. And obviously, as a country of the Commonwealth of the realm, we are not going to have the same pomp and ceremony that was seen in London this morning. But there were still things there that were to pay tribute to the King and to our new sovereign. And I want to talk to you because you and I were talking earlier this week about the money, because we hadn't at this point seen any clarification or any sense from the government about whether the King would be featured on Canadian currency moving forward. But we do have some news about that this morning.
Yes, we do. The Prime Minister's press release out of the UK this morning confirming that, in fact, yes, for those wondering about the obverse side of our money, so the heads side of our loonies and toonies, I'm trying to use the right word that numismatic coin people use, the obverse side has the monarch's image on it. Yes, that tradition is going to proceed. We've been wondering because we did not have a design, and we have seen in other realm countries, for example Australia, a vigorous debate about whether they would continue to have the King Charles on their money as they had previously had Queen Elizabeth. But Cabinet made the choice to carry on with that tradition. We will still have the King on the head side of our coins. What you saw unveiled here were some commemorative designs. I think it was the silver dollar at the front of the room there. But we have yet to see the exact kind of etching or image of King Charles as we'll all have in our pockets eventually.
Yeah, and on the $20 bill. He'll replace his mother on the $20 bill. But there wasn't really a timeline given for that. They simply asked the Royal Canadian Mint to get to work on the coins, and so we'll see how quickly that goes into circulation. I did want to just touch on, before I bring in a guest, Janice, on the crown, the Canadian Royal Crown that was featured, because it has changed, notably, and we've seen this through other decisions the government has taken, as written by our colleague J.P. Tasker yesterday, moving away from the prominence of the religious factor and connection between the crown and religion. The crown, the Canadian Royal Crown, is certainly an indication of that, and is much more Canadianized and perhaps more modern than we would have seen before.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of motifs. You know, we won't break them all down. You heard in the ceremony them going through some of the specific ones. But the idea here, I think, is that this transitionary period is a chance to sort of turn a page, to make a new mark, to send a new message. And I think the thing that the King feels he has in common with people here, very much the interest in the environment. We've seen it from the color scheme at this ceremony, the floral motifs, but it's flowers of Canada here, as opposed to the floral motifs of the nations of the United Kingdom that you see on the materials from the UK. And you know, the ceremony kicking off, you know, with you know, the Indigenous drumming, you know, hard to miss the message there. You know, and the words of hope that in this treaty partner, Indigenous peoples, you know, have someone who will listen and wants to understand their story and how that works.
That's an excellent segue, Janice. Thank you. I will come back to you, of course, and I know you will have guests as well. One of the first people, as Janice was mentioning there, that you heard from was Ottawa's former English poet laureate, Albert Dumont. He himself is First Nations. Let's listen a little bit back to his words, and then he'll join us.
From the eastern sky, a new dawn enters Indigenous sacred land. The memories of the oldest pines rise to greet its shimmering light. The trees sway joyfully in remembrance of a happy time long ago, before the power of the British sword destroyed the tranquility of gentle Turtle Island. Today, a vow made from afar brings hope that honor will again grace the circle from which the wampum of peace and friendship is held tightly in the care of Minu Manitou, the Good Spirit. A new day showing itself on the horizon, bringing forth the heart of an honorable human being who steps forward, his crown he lays before God, the measure of his word he lays before the people. The blood of our hearts send forth a hopeful song in recognition of Charles III, the King of the Commonwealth, who promises to strengthen the human bond between the monarchy and all peoples of the Commonwealth.
That's Albert Dumont, Ottawa's former English poet laureate, but also, of course, a storyteller and a prominent figure in his own community. He was part of the ceremony in the last hour. And I want to bring Albert Dumont in now. He's just standing outside there at the building at the John A. Macdonald. Billy, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again, too, Rosie.
And that was a beautiful tribute to the King and to this moment. But I'm glad we played that one clip, Albert, because I found it moving that you were able to touch on some of the more difficult parts of the monarchy and colonialism, saying that part about the power of the British sword. Why did you want to make sure to include that message today?
Because it's a fact that the past wasn't pretty at all, that there was a lot of outrages, and so it was something that I felt was necessary to say, and especially at the beginning of the statement.
Yeah. Why did you want to be here today, Albert? Because I guess some people might ask that. Why was it important for you to be here?
It's, I think that it's important for an Indigenous voice, an Indigenous representative on such a day as this, or any day that affects what Canada is going to look like in the future. It's just common sense to me that an Indigenous voice speak at a time like this.
What would you hope to see from King Charles moving forward, given that he has signaled both an interest in reconciliation and in the environment and the natural world?
That he's a man of his word, and that he does truly care about the environment, and you know how pure the waters are going to be, and the winds, and so he's a powerful force. Whether you know what people think about him as the king, his voice is important, and he could create great changes just by supporting environmental causes, and paying attention, taking it more seriously than he has already. I think he should.
When he was in the country last, in Canada last, there were some conversations about the idea of an apology from the monarchy for what happened to Indigenous peoples in this country. What are your thoughts on whether that is needed?
I think it's absolutely necessary, and I think that if he doesn't think it is, well then it's not somebody I'm going to connect with very well, because I think if somebody has suffered at the hands of somebody else, and that person should be remorseful if they want to have a respectful and honorable relationship with the person that they've hurt.
Albert Dumas, always nice of you to spend some time telling us your thoughts and sharing your important words with everyone too. Glad you were there today, and nice to speak with you, sir.
Nice to speak with you too, very much.
Okay, enjoy the nice weather. Thanks very much. Good to see you. We're now going to have a little look back at some of the highlights from the coronation ceremony of King Charles at Westminster Abbey. It was obviously an incredible and historic moment. And in case you weren't up quite at 5 a.m., here's a little bit of what we saw as Charles was crowned.
I here present unto you King Charles, your undoubted king.
Give grace that I may find in thy service perfect freedom, and in that freedom knowledge of thy truth.
Just a culmination there of some of the remarkable moments that we saw earlier this morning as King Charles was officially anointed and crowned, as well, of course, as his wife, Queen Camilla. Once in a lifetime, almost, opportunity to see this sort of thing. Maybe twice in a lifetime for some of us this go around. Let's go back to Janice McGregor. She is down there near Parliament Hill, and with her she has the British High Commissioner to Canada, Janice.
Yeah, hello again, Rosie. Yes, here with Susanna Goshko, the High Commissioner here in Ottawa. We were just talking about how Ottawa scored some better weather today than London did. But we're also going to start with a bit of a civics lesson, just so everyone understands, because you are the High Commissioner representing the British government here in Ottawa, but you are not an ambassador for the royal family, because Canada has its own relationship relationship with the Crown as a sovereign realm. What was the ceremony like for you today, though, in that context as a representative?
Well, you're right. I'm here as the Prime Minister's representative, not the representative of the royal family, which I would be if this weren't a Commonwealth realm. For me, today was really special. I thought it was a great way of showing, when our Foreign Secretary was over here in January, he said, you know, we have lots of friends around the world, but for the UK and Canada, it's different. We're family. And I really thought you felt that today. There was a real sense of common values, and lots that you saw today in today's ceremony are things that the King has really championed. There was a big focus on the environment with a speech about a poem about the importance of protecting the environment. There was a big piece on the importance of community. These are things that the King has championed throughout his life, and it's lovely to see them celebrated here today.
There's been a lot of talk today about modernization and relevancy and updating symbols to reflect kind of 2023 where we are now. As someone who thinks about the relationship between the UK and Canada a lot, where do you think that relationship is in this kind of moment of rethinking and modernization?
I think the relationship between the UK and Canada is hugely strong, and I think it always continues to evolve. Change is good and history is good, and it's possible to have both of those things and remain relevant. Look, the UK and Canada, we see the world in the same way, we share the same sets of values, and nowhere has that been more apparent than today, with this real focus on diversity, on sustainability, on youth, on community. These are things that matter to both of our countries.
It, of course, is also a day of pomp and circumstance, and a shout out to everyone who got up early in their pajamas and had their coronation quiche or whatever. I know you were also doing some lighter things over at your residence and in the context of the celebrations back home. Do you want to tell us about some of those initiatives that you've been working on for the coronation?
Well, I am one of those people who was up at 5 o'clock this morning. I wanted to see the images of people in London. I feel like for those people who've been sleeping overnight on the streets in the rain to see this, it's the least we can do to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning here. We're doing lots of things, including welcoming lots of people to my residence tomorrow for a garden party, but perhaps one of the more fun things we've done is we've got a coronation beer which we've curated with Bicycle Breweries. It's a beer that really celebrates the best of Canada and the best of the UK.
And I noticed, though, and I have to say this just to get serious for a moment, your press release said it pairs very well with UK cheeses. We are in trade negotiations right now, and I saw a message there, Rosie. As your trade reporter, I think there's some subtle soft power diplomacy going on here. Sanagashko, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it, and happy coronation. Enjoy your festivities.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janice, and thanks to the High Commissioner. Yeah, I also saw that press release about the coronation beer and thought that was quite a lot of fun, and that's other ways that that this moment in time is being marked and celebrated by people here. Of course, that room today was full of lots of representatives from different Commonwealth countries who are here in this country as representatives. I believe that Janice is now going to bring in another guest, and that's the Minister Dominic LeBlanc in a moment. He, of course, has an interesting relationship to his father, Romeo LeBlanc, was the Queen's representative in Canada when he was the Governor General. So he probably has a couple of stories there to tell about how the monarchy personally affected his life. And a reminder, too, that King Charles himself, we've talked about this, has much as his mother did, a deep relationship and a close connection with Canada. He's been here as Prince of Wales and King. Well, Prince of Wales primarily, hasn't been here since he was named King, some 18 times, traveling to every province, every territory, and spending some significant amount of time in this country through his lifetime. And that, too, is something that has been highlighted today. I'll go now to Janice, who's with Minister LeBlanc.
Hi there, Rosie. Yeah, so you are at Rideau Hall today. I was just chatting with Dominic LeBlanc here. His family lived there for a while. I think our viewers probably know he is the son of a former Governor General, and therefore well positioned to speak, I think, to the relationship Canada has with the Crown, because it's something that his family was engaged with personally. I'll just start off the top. Your thoughts on this day, this ceremony, what this means for you, given your personal background, really?
Sure. So, I mean, I obviously thought, as a lot of Canadians have, about the constitutional significance of today's ceremony. The last one happened before you and I and Rosemary were born. These are rare moments in the evolution of a constitutional monarchy. There's also a series, as you say, of personal memories or connections that one thinks about at moments like this. I was lucky enough in the 1990s, when my father was Governor General, to live at Rideau Hall with my family for a number of years. I was working then in the Prime Minister's office and living at Rideau Hall. You can imagine those were fun and interesting times for me. But it also gave me an opportunity, for example, when the then Prince of Wales was in Ottawa. The royal family stays at Rideau Hall when they're in Ottawa. Prince Charles was staying there for, I think, a couple of days. There was one evening where there was a sort of informal family dinner. He was traveling alone. He sat with us at a casual dinner, and he spoke to my father mostly in French. A great deal of the conversation was in French. He was very interested in issues like Canadian unity. It was a year or two after a referendum in 1995 that was obviously very difficult for the country. He knew a great deal about Indigenous peoples. He told funny stories about his grandmother, the Queen Mother, visiting Canada in the 1940s. So he was telling some of the funny stories that the royal family tells to themselves and others about different moments on their visits to Canada. So it felt like a personal connection that he had. This was 25 years ago, but it was clearly a long time tradition of visiting Canada and getting to know Canadians. It was very relaxed. I kept very sort of fond memories of those conversations, and realizing that at the time he was going to be the future king, and that's what we witnessed today in London.
I want to talk to you about something you were talking about during this ceremony, which is the value of the crown as a means of stability, even while other things in our country change and modernize and move on and transition over time. Why do you think the crown is valuable here for us in 2023 in our system?
So, but the crown can also modernize, and if you think of the institution of the crown in Canada over the history of our country, for example, the Governor General now exercises all of the royal privileges and prerogatives as a Canadian living in Canada. So the Canadian crown has also modernized, but as you said, Janice, it represents a constitutional and institutional stability that many countries envy. Some of the most successful democracies in the world are constitutional monarchies. Obviously, the sovereign doesn't exercise political or legal authority in Canada. We're a democratic country with our democratic institutions, but that stability, that attachment to historical tradition has offered various governments over the decades, I think, some wise counsel, some access to institutions that don't reflect the political flavor of the day, that are, in the best sense of the term, completely nonpartisan. So it's an opportunity, I think, to allow the politics to be practiced by elected politicians, and to have some institutions, in Canada it would be the courts, it would be the Crown, that are not engaged obviously in partisan political activities, but at various moments offer that stability and continuity which are important in any democracy.
We are seeing, though, some of the symbols of the crown in Canada updated. We saw some of them during this ceremony. Talk to me about some of the thinking behind that, and also this news today. I think we were wondering what was going to happen to the money. We got our answer today. There will be a new image on the money. So tell me about some of that.
So again, that reflects the evolution of our relationship with the crown. It would be normal, if Canada has a new king, that King Charles III be reflected on things like coins, a commemorative stamp. These are just normal modernizations of things that we take for granted every day. If you think that his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, served for so many decades, you and I always saw coins and bills with that image of his mother. We haven't seen any other monarch on many of those symbols.
Did you think about changing it, though? Did Cabinet reflect and think, oh, this would be a time to make a break? Was that a serious thought?
No, I didn't participate in any discussions. It was seen as sort of a normal, routine, appropriate updating of these symbols. I didn't participate in any discussions where the cabinet considered anything other than following those traditions that have existed for decades.
Finally, as someone who has met King Charles III up close, as you told us, what should we be looking forward to, perhaps, now that he is our head of state, do you think?
I would hope, obviously, that he and the Queen would visit Canada soon. I would imagine that the government will announce those details at the right moment. They've been to Canada many, many times, but it'll be a different feeling to have His Majesty on Canadian soil as the crowned King of Canada. He has talked about issues, Janice, that have been important to Canadians for decades. So in many ways, he was a bit avant-garde. He was talking about conserving nature, protecting nature, endangered species, the environment, decades ago. And the work he's done, the Prince's Trust with students, charitable work, has reflected for a long time many of the issues that are very topical in Canada now, reconciliation with Indigenous people. So he'll come to those conversations with a long history. He'll modernize, obviously, his role and his views as our country evolves. But we think it can be and should be a happy moment for the country when he visits Canada.
Dominic LeBlanc, Intergovernmental Affairs Minister. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rosie.
Thank you, Janice, and thanks to the minister, too, for reminding Canadians that we were not born in 1953, which is when Queen Elizabeth took the throne. Different circumstances as well, because that, of course, she was a very young woman, and she took the throne unexpectedly after her father died. In this case, what we saw today, of course, King Charles has been in many ways training for this role for his entire life, and he takes it on as a man in his 70s. And as you heard there from Dominic LeBlanc, a man who has a connection with Canada, and it sounds like the minister was hinting there that he will soon visit Canada again. He was most recently here in 2022 for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. He was here with his wife Camilla, and so perhaps a visit to look forward to from the King now that he is in his role and the ceremony has happened. If you missed some of those moments from this morning, we want to show you again that important moment. Of course, King Charles officially became king when his mother, Queen Elizabeth, died, but this was the coronation ceremony taken from really the Middle Ages, much of what we saw today. So some strange and unusual moments if you're obviously not familiar with the coronation ceremony, but some very important ones too, and this is one of them. Take a look.
God save the King! God save the King!
So a very solemn moment there when the crown was placed on the King's head for the first time. And you heard, of course, the whole of Westminster Abbey cry, God save the King. Let's bring in now the Chief of the Defense Staff, General Wayne Eyre. He was also at the ceremony here in this country to take a moment to recognize this important moment for our country. General Eyre, nice to see you this morning, sir.
Yeah, good to see you, Rosie. Thanks for having me this morning.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. So tell me about the Canadian Armed Forces relationship with the Crown, how you approach that and what you're thinking about.
So there's a deep and long-standing relationship between the military and the Crown in this country, and King Charles in particular has been a tremendous supporter of our military over the decades, where he has gone out of his way to visit our units, to be part of our ceremonies, and so that support is tremendous.
There was also a contingent of the Canadian Armed Forces that was in London today for part of that ceremony. What can you tell me about who was there and how important it was for Canada to have that presence?
So we had a contingent of 45 of our Canadian Armed Forces members drawn from all arms of the service, and very, very proud to see the work that they have done representing our country on the world stage. I've received nothing but tremendous accolades for the performance they've done. So yeah, again, we're very proud of what they've done.
Have you met the king yourself before he was king?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to meet him a number of times over the last dozen years or so, including in 2010 hosting him in Petawawa, where I was the brigade commander, and he spent an afternoon visiting the troops. Very poignant visit as well. I recall during that time he spent some time in a small venue talking to the families of our fallen from Afghanistan. And what really struck me was the time that he spent with each of the family members individually, just sharing stories and talking. It really showed a human side of him. Now, I also had the chance last year in London as part of the Five Eyes Chiefs of Defense conference to meet him. And we had a great chat about what's happening in the world and how our allies are working together to promote peace and stability.
That's interesting because, of course, he has been known to be a little bit more outspoken about geopolitics and things happening in the world. Is that the impression that you got from him, that he is quite engaged? Not that his mother wasn't, but she wasn't necessarily so open and vocal about it.
Well, that's very much the impression I got. Very interested in our perspective, very interested in what's happening around the world and what can be done about it.
Do you think that the fact that the king served himself in the British military, that has allowed him to make a connection with the military inside the Commonwealth, that he has a better perhaps understanding of what your roles are?
Oh, absolutely. It gives an appreciation of the conditions of service. You can relate with the ranks, the terminology, the experience of one in the military.
Okay, General Eyre, we'll leave it there. Nice of you to make the time. We'll have you back to talk about other issues happening in the world soon, but I appreciate you taking a moment with us today. Thank you, sir.
Oh, no doubt, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Rosie.
Okay. Thanks, General. Appreciate it. All right. If you are just tuning in, I am Rosemary Barton. I'm here at Rideau Hall. The grounds are open today for people to come in and wander if you've never been here. Lovely grounds that you can spend some time in. And there, of course, we've just finished the ceremony down there at Parliament Hill, close to Parliament Hill, where a number of symbols and tributes were made to King Charles. Let's watch now another moment from the coronation earlier this morning. The King and the Queen and royal family waving to the crowd from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. Of course, that's an iconic moment to see the royal family on that balcony at Buckingham Palace. They've been there for many moments in time, some sad and some very happy, like today. You saw that was a moment where you kind of saw King Charles break his somber, serious tone for once and seem to enjoy the moment a little bit. But certainly there were millions of people out in London today also taking part in this, in spite of the bad weather and the sometimes torrential rain. And Renee Filippone stuck it out as well, and she's at Hyde Park in London. Renee, thank you for sticking around a little bit longer to give us a sense of what the day's been like for you and for the people that you saw there.
Well, Rosie, it's cleanup time now. They're picking up all the litter from this one viewing location in Hyde Park. There were 3 others like it with thousands of people at each location. They all got here very early, all very excited to be with like-minded people to watch the coronation together. A lot of the people who were here had tried to get to the Mall in those areas along the procession, but it was just too busy for them. So everything really got going today just after 10 o'clock, and that's when sort of the pageantry kicked off with that Diamond Jubilee carriage with the King and Queen in it. And that was sort of the first moment when the crowds started to cheer, the first time we heard God Save the King, and really sort of the kickoff of all of the events today. Watching with the crowd here, there were, a number of highlights, that being the first. They also got very excited to see the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Kate. And then the moment, in the Mass, people here were quite quiet, anticipating the moment when that crown would be placed on Charles's head. And that really was when things got quite loud, lots of cheers. And that is one of the moments from everyone I spoke with here today. They say they felt some emotion there. And as we went through the day, the things we were expecting, the procession back, the balcony as people just saw, and then the last event that some of the royal diehards waited around for was that flyover. Obviously, because of the weather, it was not nearly as big as it was expected to be, but they still really enjoyed it here as well today. So the crowds dispersed quite quickly, very soaked, very drenched. Some of them were basically sitting here on the grass in just their jeans to tough it out, because they were really excited to be a part of it and be here with people who wanted to celebrate just like them.
Yeah, I mean, I was there for the Queen's funeral, Renee, and I just remember the overwhelming throngs of people. I don't even know that TV pictures do it justice, how many people come out for these things and how important it is to be there. So give me a sense of what people were telling you about why they would sit in the pouring rain to be there for this moment, which I recognize is a moment in history, but perhaps they have an explanation about why they would trouble to do that.
Well, it was wild. When we showed up here really early, we got here about 7:30. There were a couple of hundred people. We set up our stand, we turned around, and then all of a sudden they were just all the way back. And I kept asking people, why? And they're like, well, we're from London. This weather's no problem. But one thing that did come up a number of times is that they were here for the Queen, in honor of the Queen, that was important for them to be here and watch this moment with Charles and the coronation. And they felt that was just a sign of respect. But here's have a listen to a couple of people we spoke with and their reflections and thoughts on the day.
I found it particularly moving when they set up the screens and then they obviously anointed the king, which was quite incredible. And then seeing his crown actually go on was just fabulous.
It was more diverse than we were expecting, I think, so it was nice. It felt a bit more rounded, and as though he's maybe there not just for the sort of the white British people, but he is actually there for everybody.
I was at the Queen's coronation, and it just seemed fitting that the opportunity arose that I could be at the King's. So
it's wonderful to just be a part of history, today, and
with their children, Lady Louise,
do the Queen proud and do the King proud. Where else in the world would you get a bunch of people in the rain watching a screen in the middle of a muddy field? That sums up Britain.
And then tomorrow, Rosie, we will be headed to Windsor Castle for the big concert there. And then Monday, they have the bank holiday, so the celebration isn't over yet. And on Monday, they're encouraging residents to go out and volunteer in what they're calling the Big Help Out.
Well, that would be a lovely way to end a weekend. Thank you, Renee. I hope someone brings you a cup of tea or something now. I appreciate you sticking around there, even though you're a bit soggy. Thank you. Good to talk with you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Of course, remind people there is obviously a large Canadian contingent that came from Ottawa, was at the coronation ceremony, including, of course, the Governor General and her husband, and the Prime Minister and his wife are there, as long with other Canadians who are remarkable or who have made moments of service, which is one of the themes you've been hearing through the morning, an important part of their life. So you will see in pictures some of those people through the day as they made their way into that ceremony that happened much earlier this morning. But there's also, as Renee was saying, not only Londoners and British folk who thought it was important to be there today, but Canadians who traveled there, who wanted to be there for that day, this day, which is, of course, an incredible moment in time, given how long Queen Elizabeth reigned. Ed Wang is a Canadian royal commentator from Vancouver. He's one of the people that made the trip for that historic day. I'm trying to see if you're a little damp there, Ed Wang. Good to see you. So tell me why you wanted to be there for this day.
Well, I'm from Vancouver, so I'm used to the rain as well. But as you can see, Rosemary, I'm drenched, I'm a bit disheveled, and I'm quite cold. I got here at 1 a.m. this morning to grab my spot on the Mall, and I was one of the lucky few who was able to actually have a prime spot. I saw the carriage procession both to the Abbey and on the way back from the Abbey. I was one of the lucky ones to get into that circle in front of Buckingham Palace to see the balcony scene. Yeah. And the flyover. For me, it was worth it. You know, I've been to many royal events. I was here for the Platinum Jubilee in 2022. I was here for Queen Elizabeth's lying in state and state funeral in 2022. And I was here in 2011 for the marriage of Prince William and the Princess of Wales. And for me, the monarchy is very important. It's a core aspect of our constitutional structure. And I think it gives us a certain identity that distinguishes us from the United States as well. It's important for me, so I like to be here to support them.
Well, that's a pretty impressive list of the things that you've seen and done, and you look great, even if you're cold and wet. You look great. What was the highlight for you? I mean, being that close to events is obviously a big deal, but what was the highlight for you today?
Well, you know, there are so many key aspects. One of them was the camaraderie. Like, there were so many people who were cold together talking about why they're here. I saw so many Canadians here as well, which was very inspirational for me. You know, I think the moment of crowning was very poignant and really showed the, formal transition of the crown from the late Queen Elizabeth to the now King. And personally, as a Canadian, I love the fact that the King's procession back to the palace was led by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Yeah, that was a cool moment. Tell me, you're a young man. How did you get interested in the monarchy? What led you to make this a thing that you're a big fan of and a royal commentator of?
Well, thank you so much for the compliment. I'm almost 40 years old, but I wasn't born in Canada. I'm an immigrant. I became a Canadian citizen at the age of 11. And for me, for someone who came from a communist country, I really had to learn about Canadian society and what distinguishes Canadian society, how we govern ourselves, what do we take pride in, and how we see ourselves as a people on the world stage. To become a Canadian citizen, you have to learn about the Canadian system of governance. And for me, I learned how great our monarchy was and how that provided this continuity, this stability in a political system that, wasn't there in the country that I was born in. So when I became a Canadian citizen and I swore allegiance to then Queen Elizabeth as Queen of Canada, it meant so much to me. And today, at the coronation, the Archbishop of Canterbury asked people to swear allegiance to the King. And I took great pride in doing that again.
Tell me, what would you say to people, because I'm sure you know people, Ed, who don't see why the monarchy is relevant to Canada anymore, and you know that conversation is happening in other Commonwealth countries. What do you say to people who say, I just don't get it, I don't relate to this?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry for the background noise. There's still a lot of people here.
Oh, good.
I think the key issue is people are not aware of all the great things that the monarchy have been doing. The media tends to focus on, for example, TV shows like The Crown would focus on negative aspects that are more sensationalized. And people are not aware of all these, significant contributions that the royal family has made to society. One of your past speakers, Dominic LeBlanc, mentioned the Prince's Trust. One of the key goals of the Prince's Trust Canada has been veteran reintegration into society, supporting veterans as they become entrepreneurs or how they can find employment, food security in the North. That's a big issue for Indigenous groups in the North and residents in the North.
Sure.
The Prince's Trust Canada has been championing that issue and raising money for that issue for decades now. So these are things that a lot of Canadians are not aware of, but they know what happened in season 3 of The Crown. And I think once they actually learn about these very specific things that the Prince and now King has done for Canada, they might think otherwise. But people have to be open to learning, and there needs to be greater awareness of all the great things that this King has done for Canada.
What else are you going to do with your day there, Ed Wang?
So I'm in a group of royal commentators from around the world. There's one from Sweden, one from the Netherlands, one from Pakistan. We are all watching the coronation together. So we're just gonna, first warm up first, and then grab dinner.
Yes. Okay, well, it sounds like a lot of fun, and an important moment for this country, and an important moment for you personally. So thank you for talking to us, Ed. Nice to chat with you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, stay warm. Okay, as I was just mentioning, there was a Canadian delegation at Westminster Abbey for the coronation earlier today. Here's a little bit of them arriving. Astronaut Jeremy Hansen carried the flag because, of course, he's going up on the next space mission to the moon. He was accompanied by the Prime Minister and the Governor General. So those were some of the official dignitaries, obviously, who were part of the delegation, but there were lots of other people there as well, including representatives from Canada's Indigenous communities who actually got an audience with King Charles before today and were able to speak with him about reconciliation and some of the issues that are top of mind for them. The CBC's JP Tasker is also in London today. He's been with the Canada's delegation, traveling with the Prime Minister to cover the Prime Minister while he's there. Good to see you, JP. Tell me what Canadian officials are seeing and doing today, how that delegation is involved in events.
Well, I think the government is sensitive to some of the criticism at home about the monarchy, that it's archaic, that it's kind of out of date, that it's not really, relevant to modern Canada. So the delegation that the Prime Minister brought along with him is really an attempt to put the monarchy in a new light, to show that the new monarch, a new era, and also a new image. And I think that that's really reflected in what you were saying, with all of the national Indigenous leaders being here on the ground in London, having what's really a rare face-to-face with the King himself personally on Friday, and they were on hand for the coronation ceremony. He has really made reconciliation a priority. It was a big feature of his royal tour, of course, last year. There was also a lot of young people. Polls tell us that a lot of youth in Canada are not all that jazzed about King Charles and Camilla and the monarchy in general, so the government trying to make an effort by bringing a lot of young delegates here to London to be a part of that coronation ceremony, and then also touching on some of the things that the King himself is interested in. Climate change being top of mind, climate activist, scientist, as you mentioned, Jeremy Hansen, Canada's astronaut, who is headed to the moon on the Artemis 2 mission, all on hand for this. And it really is to showcase that the King and the Prime Minister are really very much aligned on some of the big issues of the day: reconciliation, climate change, and Ukraine as well. Some traditional elements also featured in that beautiful post-coronation parade down the Mall to Buckingham Palace. Dozens of Canadian Armed Forces personnel, the RCMP musical ride, those beautiful horses that the RCMP have sent over to the royal family that are very much treasured by the late Queen and now, of course, the King and Camilla.
I know that you've done some reporting before you left about some of that, the attempts by this government to, as you say, modernize our relationship to the monarchy. One of the things that they unveiled today was the new Canadian royal crown, which no longer has a cross, no longer features the initials, for instance, of the monarch. But you also did a story about how the defender of the faith, that notion has been also removed. So just talk to me about some of the things that you've seen in terms of how the government is approaching a new monarch and the opportunity, I think, that they're taking in doing that.
Well, I think it's interesting as we're talking about how popularity has slumped in recent months after that Elizabethan era, after 70 years on the throne by Queen Elizabeth. Canada and the Commonwealth are really grappling with how to treat the monarchy in this time. And so there are some changes afoot. They are dumping that Defender of the Faith title for Charles in Canada. They are trying to put a fresh spin on how Charles is reflected in all of the imagery that we're seeing. I was quite surprised, frankly, to see the government push ahead with putting Charles on the $20 bill and his effigy on the coin. I wasn't sure if that was something that was going to come. But they might be reading the tea leaves. Yes, polls suggest that Canadians are down on Charles and the monarchy. But really what experts tell me is that about 20% of Canadians are diehard royalists, 20% are diehard Republicans. And then there's that kind of squishy 60% in the middle. People who are, not necessarily opposed, but not all that excited either. But they're not so sure about dumping a stable system led by the royal family. So the government might be realizing that there's not a huge appetite for change, even though some of the polls might suggest that there is. But really, they're okay with the status quo. They just want to see it modernized, kind of brought into the 21st century, brought into 2023. I think the delegation reflects that. I think the changes to the title reflect that. And I also think the outreach to Indigenous leaders is really all part of that effort. Charles trying to show the people that are his subjects in Canada that he's in touch with some of the issues that we care about most.
Right. JP Tasker, so good of you to make the time while you're over there. I know you have a busy another 24 hours ahead of you. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Rosie.
We talked a little bit about how making the monarchy relevant and conversations happening inside this country and others about what to do moving forward. My colleague Catherine Cullen did an interview with the Governor General before she went over to London, and she talked about that very issue, but said that she doesn't feel that debate and that conversation is sort of a burning one, top of mind for Canadians, and of course particularly that no one has come forward and said, okay, if it's not a constitutional monarchy, what is it? But those are obviously things the Governor General is thinking about as the representative of the King in this country. She, of course, Mary Simon, was over there for the coronation. You saw her in those pictures. And as an Inuit Governor General, the first Indigenous Governor General ever, she did have a special way to symbolize that and mark that herself in what she was wearing to the coronation. It was made by a Canadian Indigenous singer, songwriter, and designer, Beatrice Deer. We're told the embroidery symbolizes Simon's mandate and relationship between Indigenous peoples and other Canadians, both as Governor General and as the Sovereign's representative. The Governor General does like to choose things that she can send a message with or signal back to her own Inuit culture. And so she's done that again today with some beautiful beadwork that she was wearing today. Let's come back here to Ottawa, over to Janice there on Wellington Street, where she has another guest with her. Janice.
Yeah, hi, Rosemary again. I'm here with two guests from the Royal Canadian Mint, Alex Reeves and Marie LeMay, and I'm talking to them about two totally different things. They want me to be really clear about that. But there are two kinds of coins in the news today. One, the collector coins. We saw some new designs unveiled, but also we got some news today about what's coming to the money that we all carry around in our pockets. So I'm going to talk to Alex first because he speaks to the collector coins, and I'm actually quite privileged. I've got the new silver coin here. I don't know if Tony can get in and see. Of course, during this ceremony that we just watched, we had a much larger shot of it here. But I'll let Alex tell us a little bit more about this coin and the tradition, really, of having collector coins to mark a new monarch.
Yes, well, the Royal Canadian Mint puts out lots of coins annually, and we often mark great historical moments, and certainly the first coronation in Canada in 70 years is an ideal occasion to put a commemorative product line out. So we have put out 4 coins, 2 silver and 2 gold coins commemorating the coronation of His Majesty. And you're holding there a proof silver dollar, which features, actually all 4 coins feature the same design, which is the King's Royal Cipher.
And this is a different kind of silver dollar than I was remembering from my childhood, the kind of thing I used to get for public speaking competitions when the guys from the Legion would slip you one. This is actually still very middle class, a lovely collector's piece, but the gold one even more higher end. So tell me how many you're actually striking of each and how this works here.
Well, we're making 25,000 of the proof silver dollar. and it's $69.95. So that's
A bit more middle class.
exactly. It's approachable. So it's being sold actually as of today in our boutiques in Ottawa and Winnipeg, on mint.ca as well, and through our dealer network. And the other coins vary. There's a 20th ounce gold coin, which is around the $300 mark. It's not too bad if you want something really special like gold, and it's pure gold and silver, like the best silver and gold money can buy. They're both 4/9 pure, 99.999%. Sorry, 99.99%.
So now I'm going to talk about the circulation coins because this is, part of our everyday life, right? To the extent that anyone uses cash, I suppose, anymore. Marie Lemay, the president of the Mint, you now have a big job to do, which is overseeing something quite historic, right? Having a new image on the obverse side of the coin. So tell me about how this works, how the process works when we have a new head of state.
Yeah, so today the government has announced that they've tasked us with designing the new permanent effigy. So it is a process that has several steps. So we're going to start by inviting artists that we work with and some of our engravers to show their interest. And then we will select a number of artists and engravers, and we will provide a design brief and ask them to do a design and submit the design. That will be evaluated. An artist will be picked, selected, and then we will work on getting the finalization of that design. After that would be probably, we estimate it's going to be a 2 or 3 month process, and then we'll need the approvals for this from Buckingham Palace, from the government. So we expect to be able to share the selected design in the fall. So I think that will be a big moment. After that, we need to make the tools, we need to manufacture the pieces, so there's another 8 to 12 weeks before we can actually have coins, and then they enter circulation. So that's at a slow pace because we produce only 15% of the coins that circulate right now.
And correct me, so for people who keep track, he looks left or right on the new coins when you switch? It alternates. Queen Elizabeth looked in one direction and he'll look in the other, right?
So the design brief will specify that he looks left.
But it'll be a Canadian artist this time?
Absolutely.
Okay, over to you, Rosie.
Okay, Janice, that's a whole bunch of stuff I didn't know about coins. So thank goodness I have you here. I didn't know one had to look left and what I know. And I'm glad you know more about it than I do. Thank you so much for that. I want to bring in a guest beside me now. Philip Legasse is an associate professor of international affairs at Carleton University and an expert on Canada's relationship with the monarchy. Just what we need today. This is your day.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's a big day.
Let's talk a little bit for Canadians who maybe still don't quite get why we have a monarchy still. Like, they got it before, and now they're saying, I'm not sure I understand why we have it still. What would you say to them?
Well, I think it's important to realize that Canada was a dominion of the British Empire. It was a colony initially. And over time, as we became more autonomous, not independent, but autonomous, starting after the First World War and into the 1930s, the way that we actually achieved that autonomy was through the Crown to a great degree. If you look at the Statute of Westminster in 1931 is a good example, but other things that we did to Canadianize the Crown, how the Crown's powers are exercised and so forth, until such time as we had the negotiations to patriate the Constitution.
Yep.
And at that point, ultimately, it was decided that we would stay a constitutional monarchy with the Queen as the Queen of Canada in a role that's separate and distinct from the Crown's role in the United Kingdom. So although we have a personal union between the monarch of the United Kingdom and the monarch of Canada, it's a separate office, it's a separate crown, and that's a decision that we made in 1982.
There seems to, Dominic Lalonde was talking about this today in the ceremony, there seems to be a recognition that a constitutional monarchy provides a certain amount of stability to a country. Do you agree with that, and why is that?
I think that's correct. I mean, ultimately, there's nothing that says you have to have a constitutional monarch to have a parliamentary system that divides the head of state from the head of government like we do. But as you can imagine, when it comes to having a hereditary office that plays, an emergency function in certain cases, and that it really removes from a lot of public debate who's going to run for governor general, for instance. Like, we don't have to have that kind of election and imbue it with partisanship or make it a purely partisan appointment. There's still that underlying overarching symbol of the state, as it were, that performs that function. So it does provide continuity. It does provide a good distinction between really what is national, the state representative function, versus the political government function. And it's one I think we should really hold on to as we think about how we want to understand Canada.
Let me just end on this. What do you think King Charles has to do? Because, of course, there's been lots of talk about how fond people were of his mother. Polls show decidedly less fond in this country of King Charles. What would you expect him to do to try and, win people over, if you will?
Well, I think the main thing is to try and remove any controversy from his reign. If he follows his mother's example and stay out of partisan politics, stay out of major causes, which isn't to say that he can't have things that are important to him.
Right.
I think he is somebody who does care deeply about issues such as the environment, such as other, even organic food and things like that, which may be important to him.
Yeah.
And I don't think that strays into partisan politics per se. He can still have those causes. But a number of people who assumed that he would either, try and exercise his powers in an inappropriate way, I don't think that's the case. I think he'll fall into that mold. And, he doesn't need to be his mother. He never will be, right?
Yeah.
And he just has to be his own monarch, but do it in such a way that legitimizes his position.
Do you think he'll be good?
I think he'll be perfectly fine. I'm not going to say that he's going to be the most admired monarch that we've ever had. I think his mother is just simply somebody that's too difficult to match, but he's going to do it in his own way. And I think he'll, as we're seeing, even if other realms choose to become republics and move on, he's not going to make an issue of it. He's going to do it gracefully. And at the end of the day, I think that's how he's going to demonstrate that he's a source of stability, as you said.
Philip Lagasse, good to see you. We'll try
Thanks so
and
much.
talk before the next coronation.
Yes,
Let's
that'd be
do
great.
that. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it very much. Okay, I want to bring in someone else who's celebrating today, and that is the Lieutenant Governor of Manitoba, Anita Neville, my home province. Nice to see you today, Anita Neville.
Nice to see you too, Rosemary.
Yeah, in your new role, I don't think I've spoken to you since you took on that title of Lieutenant Governor in Manitoba. So congratulations. Tell me what you are doing in Winnipeg and in the province to celebrate this moment.
Thank you for the congratulations. We're doing quite a bit. First, we've just come back from London where we met the King, which was quite spectacular. Prior to my going to London, I had a send-off from the Treaty Commissioner and the Elders Council of Manitoba to bless me and, by extension, the monarch on his new reign. And it was quite moving, quite profound. I told him about it, gave him their gift, and so that was part of our celebration, and invited him here to Manitoba on their behalf. Yesterday we had a high tea, and it was spectacular. We had about 100 people here, people who are great supporters of the monarchy, and it was wonderful. The buzz in the room was great. And this afternoon we have a service at St. John's Anglican Cathedral, an interfaith service, and we hope many will attend.
Tell me more about your meeting with King Charles. I'm not sure if you probably had met him when he was prince, but what kind of vibe did you get off of him? What was he like when you were chatting?
He was fabulous. I felt like I was talking with an old friend. I was obviously nervous when I first went in, but that passed quickly, and we covered a whole range of topics. Spent a great deal of time talking about the Indigenous population in Manitoba and the issues around reconciliation. And we talked a lot about his sustainable initiatives, sustainable environment initiatives, and also whether there's a role for the lieutenant governors as part of that. It was a wonderful conversation. And as I say, I really felt like I was talking to an old friend.
And of course, you were a member of Parliament before. What has it been like to become now a Lieutenant Governor General, where you are representing the Queen in Manitoba? What has that transition been like?
It's not been without its challenges, I have to tell you that. I am not political. I have made it quite clear to all about me that my role is not political, but it is one to amplify issues. It's been great. I've got terrific support around me, tremendous support around me. And I have to be honest, my head still thinks politically on a number of issues, but I am really not engaged in any way in political activity.
And of course, I said you're representing the Queen. You're representing the King. It takes a while to turn that
true.
channel over.
That's true.
Anita Neville, thank you. Thank you for making the time. Enjoy the rest of the activities you have today. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
We're going to leave you with some sights and sounds of this day. We'll have more coverage through the day on CBC News Network. I'm Rosemary Barton. Thanks for watching.
Power of the British sword destroyed the tranquility of gentle Turtle Island. Today, a vow made from afar brings hope